One man, one mission, to rid the world of chronic anxiety once and for all. The anxiety guy, Dennis Simsek, shares his personal transformation from living a life filled with overwhelming worry to becoming a full-fledged positivity machine, a leading authority in generalized anxiety. Dennis gets to the truth of your mental health challenges and sets you on a path to transforming each and every area of your life. Here he is, the one and only, the anxiety guy.
Warriors, welcome to another episode of the Anxiety Guy podcast, a milestone episode with my very good friend, and I would call him a family member, Marcos Codas. Welcome, Marcos.
Thank you so much. It's incredible to be here, 300 episodes later. Finally getting to be here. I kind of feel like a mixture of Obama and Speedy Gonzalez because I'm so hyped for this. So let's go.
I love it. So episode 300, I've wanted to do this interview for quite some time now because the story is very inspiring and very emotional to me. I know that we have a history that goes back pretty much a dozen years. And I think that a lot of people out there are going to connect with your story and connect with the symptoms and connect with the healing and everything. And when I'm looking at you right now, you look like a totally different person than how we met in the beginning stages. So I'm really pumped, man. Very pumped.
Yeah, and I'm so grateful to be here because, like you said, I think a lot of people are gonna relate to where I am today, but also where I was, and hopefully make that connection that you can get to whatever your goal is. It doesn't have to be what I'm living today, but that was my goal, and I achieved it. And so there is hope. It took me a long time, but I'm on the other side of that particular experience in my life, and I'm really, really grateful to have walked a little bit of that journey with you and with Rob and Hyatt. It's been a journey, and I'm very grateful for it.
Awesome, mate. So just to give a little bit of feedback, Marcos is a Paraguayan Canadian multimedia producer, filmmaker, writer, and developer, and he's one of my best friends. He is in charge of all the website stuff. When you go to theanxietyguy.com, that's all Marcos. The marketing stuff Marcos helps out with. So he is kind of the back end of everything that you see when I provide you the content. He's the one working behind the scenes. So we can be very grateful for Marcos's work. And this interview, we're going to make it very conversational. I don't even have any questions in front of me, but I just want to get really deep, and I want to touch more so on the beginning, the middle, and then what we can call as being the end, right, of this anxiety recovery journey. Marcos, just tell us a little bit about what life was like in the darkest days that you were going through just a few years back.
Well, and that's the crazy thing, right? It was just a few years back. So, and I know that years sounds like such a big amount of time, but it really isn't when you consider the grand scheme of things. And yeah, the days were hard, man. In 2006, I was, just at work, and then I was having lunch, and I started feeling dizzy, and it just got worse and worse, and it just never went away. So they took me to the ER. Obviously, when you arrive at the ER with a mohawk, a legitimate health issue isn't really the first thing that comes to the doctor's mind. So they were a little bit dismissive, but I totally understand, their perspective. This was in Ontario, in Canada. I moved to Canada when I was 17. So I understand that they had a lot more pressing issues going on than me at the time. So I'm not really resentful, but it took a long time for people to really realize, and for me to realize what I was experiencing. It took 5 years from 2006 to 2011 for me to get a diagnosis.
To take it seriously.
Yeah. And it turned out to be, a somewhat uncommon clinical condition called Meniere's disease. So basically what it does, it affects your inner ear in such a way that you're basically constantly off balance. Or, you have different symptoms, but my particular symptom is that I'm constantly off balance. A little bit less, today than I was back then, but it's basically never going to go away. You can manage it. But, during those 5 years, I basically developed extreme anxiety and agoraphobia and depression because as soon as I was trying to get out of my home, even, I would get so dizzy that it would just make me feel horrible. And so you develop this connection between going outside and feeling bad. So before you even go outside, just thinking about it, that anxiety feeling, your heart pumping, just the anticipation of the unknown and perhaps even known. It was horrible. It was really some of the darkest, and not knowing to me was the worst. Just not knowing what I had and why and whether it was going to get any better. I was like in my mid-20s and depending financially on my family, not being able to go to school, go to work. It was difficult, man, but we are on the other side, as you said.
Right. I get, what's interesting is that I get a lot of questions from people saying, well, if I already have something I'm dealing with physically, like an actual health diagnosis, and that's contributing to my anxiety, the anxiety come first or did the health thing come first? Doesn't matter. But this is one of those topics where we can really dive deep into, there is something here that's causing the disturbances physically and the dizziness and the off balance stuff and such. And so what I want to do is I want to put ourselves in your shoes. When you woke up in the morning, were you anxious pretty much right off the bat? What sort of ideas were flowing through your head? Tell us about the mornings.
Well, mornings was sleeping, actually, because my sleeping cycle got so screwed up because of basically the anxiety and just that cycle of not wanting to actually just be conscious, really. So in the end, that made it so that I was asleep for most of the day, and I just woke up at like 4 or 5 in the afternoon and just started like immediately feeling awful, obviously.
Right.
Because on top of everything else, I was putting my body through living in a different time zone basically than the one I was in. So it was horrible, and my eating habits were terrible. I ate about twice a day. I was down to under 100 pounds in terms of weight. So I wasn't really the chipper person that and love, because when you and I met, I was already on my path to recovery, and I'm usually pretty upbeat, but that wasn't the case back then.
Right. So not wanting to be conscious. I know there's, at least in my journey, when I woke up in the morning, it was like this snowball effect. It kind of started, manageable, but then it kind of transferred into this catastrophic story after catastrophic story. And I was really afraid of spurring on or thinking even that, which would turn into some kind of an emotional response. I was afraid of pretty much anything that would trigger me. Was that kind of the case as you were going through the day, tippy-toeing a bit throughout the day, or how was it as you were going through the day?
There were times, particularly before the physical diagnosis, for sure, I was scared of sneezing. I was scared of breathing because I didn't know where it was. And obviously, even back then, your mind always went to Google and then straight to the absolute worst possible scenario, right? You know that X amount of people get probably very mild stuff, and then that 0.1% get absolute knackered, and that's where your mind goes to, right? That's why I never Google symptoms anymore. But I had a very, very different tool in my tool chest, which was my dad. My dad, as you know, is a doctor, and even though he didn't practice in Canada, that didn't stop him from actually being a doctor. He just wasn't practicing. So his clinical outlook on my day really saved my life, because he made it so that it was manageable for me to even consider going through the day until, we eventually found a diagnosis. So I was 100% afraid of doing anything, really.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew I had that reassurance from my support group, which just happened to include a medical doctor, that I was going to be okay, and that was huge for me. So I remember feeling despair and hopelessness a lot less than I think I would have had I not had the family support that I had.
Looking back, and let's say Jody comes up to you and says, Marcos, I'm an agoraphobic. If you were to give me one piece of advice, anything that comes to your heart right now, what would you tell that agoraphobic? She's been in her house, can't leave her house for months, maybe years at this point. What would be the first thing?
Well, the thing about agoraphobia is that it's the same regardless of whether you have a clinical condition or not that's underlying the whole thing, right? If you identify agoraphobia as an issue and you're physically able to overcome it, and you realize that the agoraphobia itself is a physical manifestation of a mental situation, to me, exposure therapy changed my life. To me, CBT and retraining my brain, because that's basically what I had to do. I had to retrain my brain into feeling safe outside. And the only way to do that was to be outside. And it sounds absolutely terrifying. At the time, it was, I'm very talkative, but even just talking about it makes me hesitant, So in terms of advice, find places that bring you joy and peace. For me, going very specifically to parks, that really helped me a lot. And Canada is very blessed with a lot of parks, even in the inner cities. You basically can walk, and I'll get to the walking, but you don't need to go very far in order to be in a space that's still open, but usually somewhat isolated and more surrounded by nature than by people. And to me, that I felt so grounded by nature and interacting with nature rather than human beings, because nature doesn't judge you. I never felt judged by the water or the trees or the ducks. The ducks maybe, but everything else was fine. Right. So. But it took me months to even make it to like the 300 meters that the park was at. I started by literally walking around my block. Gotcha. And that was a huge win for me for like a good couple of months. My win for the day was whether I was gonna be able to walk the block around my house or not. So start small, but push yourself a little bit, at the time, and find your place for peace. Right. Because there is something out there for everybody. You will find it.
Right. And at what point does an emotional trigger turn into something neutral? Like, some people have this kind of miraculous, I did some exposure work, I did some imaginative work, and all of a sudden I feel like I'm perceiving this completely different. At what point did a trigger turn into something that was just something on the outside to you? And how long did it take?
Years.
Years.
Literal years.
Still something to neutral.
Yeah, from something to neutral, definitely. I started my actual treatment, I would say, in 2011, and just up until a couple of years ago, even 2017, 2018, being stuck at a red light in a very, in sort of a gridlock situation still triggered my anxiety, because that's sort of my worst case scenario. I'm driving a vehicle, so I'm responsible not just for my safety, but also for the safety of others. And then, that really triggers my anxiety, because I'm stuck there. And if I don't feel well, I can't go anywhere. And for me, for any anxiety, for any person experiencing anxiety, the need to always find your exit, it's something that I think everybody can relate to, and I just couldn't find it. And just, it took years. So it took a long time. So it's definitely not for me. It wasn't something that just happened overnight. It took a lot of hard work and a lot of, I don't call them setbacks, but it took a lot of experiences that were on a very wide spectrum of positivity.
There is something really important, and we talk about identity a lot. And even, with our work together over the years, we've discussed this idea of who am I and what do I believe my worth is, and that sort of thing, and self-worth, identity. A lot of people listening right now have identified with their diagnosis. They've identified with panic disorder or agoraphobic, or, they wear the label and they check in with it pretty much throughout the entire day. Was that you for a number of years? Did you consciously and unconsciously check in and say, I am X, therefore I can only do this? Did you have that?
100%. And the sad part is that your surroundings sometimes encourage this, even when they mean well. Because eventually, if you go through this experience for a period of time, your family starts to realize that there are certain limitations to what you can do and what you have done in the past. And even without thinking about it, a lot of them will start to pigeonhole you into a certain behavior pattern or situation or achievement or lack thereof. So definitely, at one point, I was the guy in the family who had, because obviously I could only interact with my family for the most part. The internet wasn't this huge social thing back then, that came later. So for me at the beginning, 100%, I was the guy who just couldn't do it. Marcos is not coming to the birthday because he's not coming,
Right.
And you know why, right?
What would you tell those people right now, knowing that you could see the transition from anxiety disorder, Marcos, to I don't know who I am, Marcos, what's going on, to, here I am and I'm comfortable with who I am now, this peaceful kind of curious, flexible person that you are now? What would you tell those people that are identifying with being anxiety or being depression? What would you tell them?
To me, the key to unlabeling myself as the the anxiety guy, not to steal your thunder, buddy, but that's sort of the way I thought of myself, right? But I think one key thing that I did, and I'm not really tooting my own horn, it also really happened sort of by mistake, but I started spending a lot of my time as an agoraphobic studying. And not just studying, one particular thing. I started studying around 2010, 2011, when decentralization of education was starting to happen. And Coursera, for example, was just starting to happen. And back then you could audit the whole course for free, and then only you didn't even have to pay back then for certificates, I think. So Coursera is this massive learning platform, right? So instead of just wallowing in misery, which I also did quite a lot of, but it wasn't the only thing I was doing anymore. I always wanted to learn about music. So I took a course on composition. And then, I know now how to compose music. I would love to know how to record it. So I took a course on audio production, and then it just kept building this skill set that by the time years later I came out of my anxiety and agoraphobia journey, I had a huge resume of stuff that I knew how to do. So despite not being, in the sort of job market for a long time, I was able to start my own company and start working directly with customers, doing the stuff that I loved. So in all honesty, I don't think if I hadn't gotten sick, I wouldn't be living the dream life that I live today, because I would have been way too busy, doing the rat race and
Right.
just, not really stopping and listening to what I really wanted to do with my life. So study is what I would say.
Study. So instead of
It doesn't have
waiting,
to be in a formal environment either, by the way.
right.
Just
Right.
build yourself in whatever area it is that you want to build yourself in.
Right. So you put all this stuff on the shelf because of the label. I can't do it now because I'm experiencing X, right? And then you stop waiting for the right time and you kind of went for it, and that brought you closer to who you truly are and what you wanted to do. A lot of people out there waiting for the right time. They're waiting for the right feeling. They're waiting for the signal, the sign.
Yeah.
But you're telling them, don't wait, right? Whatever you put on the shelf, whatever your past interests and passions were, that leads to what you truly want.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we live in an amazing era right now. 20 years ago, I couldn't tell you this because it wasn't as easy to build yourself up intellectually and emotionally and personally at a distance from other people. That wasn't possible. Mm-hmm. It is now. So we, despite being convinced that we're living in an era of exceeding the amounts of information that we should be consuming day by day. Mm. On the flip side, this technology also allows us, if we take it seriously and measuredly, it allows us to better ourselves in ways that were previously unheard of in human history. So it really, it's a tool, and it's up to us to decide how we use it and how much of it we use. That said, I gotta sort of hijack the thread a little bit, because I when you told me people waiting for the right time, there is no right time. And the two biggest events in my life that led to breakthroughs in recovery were unplanned experiences where I had to put myself through things that I was deathly scared of. And both of them were trips. The first one was moving back to Paraguay because I wanted to meet my then girlfriend, now wife's family. So in 2015, still very much, sort of just starting the recovery journey, my parents decided to move back to Paraguay as a retirement option. And so I just jumped in the plane with them, took my cat, with me because he was awesome. And I was not going to leave him in Canada. So I did the whole rigmarole, getting him the international travel papers, and brought him all the way to Paraguay. And I was terrified of traveling, let alone the 36-hour trip from Calgary.
Wow.
So that was my first trip. You got to remember, right? I started feeling ill in 2006, and in 2015 was my first trip on an airplane since I gotten sick. And it was a 36-hour trip, across the continent. So I was terrified, and it wasn't fun, but I didn't die. It really made me realize, yes, there is this very real boundaries of what I can do, but it's much farther away than I thought it was, because what I just did was difficult, but it wasn't deathly,
So people are stronger than what they give themselves credit for then.
100%.
And they're more courageous, and they're more capable.
The thing that breaks my heart a lot about people who suffer anxiety is that they're constantly labeled as cowards. And there's nobody braver than the person who wakes up every day knowing that they're going to be afraid and they still go through it.
Right.
So, for somebody who is, listening to this, perhaps thinking, yeah, I am suffering through anxiety, I can't do it. You can. It's going to be scary, but you can.
Just coming to the end right now, but why don't you just let us know what healing feels like? One the beginning, the messy middle. It's all confusing, very vulnerable. And now it just seems like you've got flow in your life. There's an effortlessness there. There isn't as much striving or fighting. But tell us what it feels like to be on the other side.
Well, it isn't effortless. Is the first thing that I would say. But it's definitely not as hard as it used to be. For me, having structured my life around bringing positivity into it and wellness into it, it is a matter of perpetuating those positive behavioral cycles. So it's not, just doing whatever I want. It's not just going out there and partying and getting drunk. That's not me. The circle of positive behavior is still something that I work on daily. But in terms of feeling, I wake up every day, and when I open my eyes, the first thing that I do is call my dogs into my bed. I get my face licked by a couple of poodles, and then my wife comes and tells me, we can have whatever for lunch. We both work from home, so I cannot believe that this is my life. Obviously it's happening, and it just brings a level of joy and gratefulness that I don't think I would have experienced had I not gotten sick. So I'm actually grateful that I got super, super sick for like a decade and a half, because it set me up for feeling every single positive thing that I have in my life, to appreciate it to the 1000%. And I don't think people who haven't gone through something like this, through hardship like this, I don't think they get the same experience out of life. So in the end, I'm 100% grateful, and it feels absolutely great. And it's not effortless. I work at it every day. Some days are easier than others. Today in particular, I was having a great day, and then not so good. But then, we started talking again. So I
got better.
Yes, definitely.
You're an inspiration, my friend. This story, I know there's so much more to this story, but I wanted to kind of put it into a small space here. And just to give people a different viewpoint, right? Because a lot of people listening are just at the start of their journey. Everything is very challenging, just to find a sense of inner peace and relax their body. Even relaxing seems to be a threat to a lot of people. But this story itself is very inspiring to show people what's possible for their lives, and the domino effect, right? Where
yes.
you start to improve yourself on the inside. Next thing you know, there's a relationship there that you never thought would happen. And there's dogs come in, and then, you start becoming a mechanic. Next thing you know, you're doing all these different things. Relationships are growing, careers getting better. It's kind of a domino effect, right?
100%.
So, yeah. So thank you so much for inspiring, my friend. And is it okay for people to contact you? I know you're on the Facebook anxiety support group, messaging from time to time, but personally messaging you and just sharing a question maybe, along with one of your latest projects. How can they contact you, and what's the latest?
Yeah, for sure. So you can find me on Twitter, actually, which is the social media I'm the most active in, because that's actually where I met my wife in 2011. So I have a soft spot for it. It's gone a little bit downhill, but I'm still sort of fond of it, like that drunk uncle that you still like. So you can find me at Marcos Codas on Twitter. And yeah, of course, I'm always happy to talk to people. I try to engage within the Facebook group as much as I can. Obviously, time is limited, but I do my best. And if they want to reach out to me personally, for sure, just shoot me a tweet. Even just let me know if the site's getting a little wonky or something, because that really it tickles my bells when people let me know something is wrong and then I fix it. It makes me feel really happy. In terms of projects, actually, I launched my own NGO at the end of last year. which is called Juntos Bajo el Sol, which means Together Under the Sun. It's dedicated to decentralizing education using open source technology and solar energy. And I'm currently building the prototype for the solar powered digital library that I'm hoping to take into remote areas of Paraguay so that people without access to the internet can still get digital books and digital resources for education. Wow. So that's kind of what I'm working on right now.
Very helpful. Awesome, mate. Thanks for being on the podcast. It's fantastic. We're going to do it again for sure. And
let's hope it doesn't take 300 more episodes, because I don't know. I'm starting to get like super gray in the beard and the hair. So I might not be.
The beard looks good. Don't stop. Yeah. And so if people want me to relay any questions to Marcos, endtheanxiety@gmail.com or on Twitter @Marcos Codas. Catch up with Marcos. Very inspiring, no matter where you are, what stage you are in the healing journey. Guys, thank you so much for being with us. Remember that you are more than anxiety. We'll see you in the next episode.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks for being an important part of the Anxiety Guy podcast community. If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a positive rate and review. If you're searching for further support on your road to recovery from anxiety, head over to anxietyexit.com and take part in the powerful End the Anxiety program based around the CBT model. If you're searching for a more one-on-one approach, you can sign up now for personal coaching sessions with Dennis via Skype. Remember, you are more than anxiety. See you in the next episode.